pages. You can also follow us on our LinkedIn pages and WhatsApp for updates. My name is Oluwatosin Zubair, and I'll be your host for today. Our topic for today is authenticity versus expectations, navigating identity in professional spaces. Guiding us today through the tension between who we are and what our professional spaces expect of us is our speaker, Raymond Tete Noete. Raymond is a laboratory professional, youth development advocate, and a fellow of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, working at the intersection of science, data, and sustainable development to expand opportunities for young people across Africa. With a foundation in laboratory science, he has developed expertise that shapes a systems thinking approach that now informs his work in development and innovation. His professional journey reflects a deliberate shift from technical precision to broader impact, where he applies structured problem solving to address one of Africa's most pressing challenges: the disconnect between education and real-world application. Through his work with Data Bloom Africa, mentorship, and public speaking, he equips young people with future-ready skills aligned with the sustainable development goals, education, innovation, and inclusive growth. He is driven by a clear conviction: empowering young people with the right tools and guidance is not just an investment in their future, but in the future of the continent. Raymond's evolution into public speaking mirrors his broader journey of growth and transformation, from early setbacks and personal insecurities to confidently moderating conversations and engaging professional audiences. He embodies the principle that growth is built through action, resilience, and self-belief. Please join me in welcoming Raymond.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm not sure that was me, but I think my name was attached to it, so I'll take it. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and thank you so much for a very wonderful introduction. I hope we can all hear me. If you can hear me in the chat, can you give me a thumbs up, maybe an emoji, anything? All right, thank you. So like she mentioned rightly, my name is Raymond. I think for the purposes of this, I prefer you call me Ray so we can cut down some of the formalities. I'm very honored to be here, and this is an opportunity I don't take lightly, and I'm very glad that I was brought on this very impressive platform to share my 2 cents on a subject that I believe is very key and very important to all of us. So I'll begin. For the theme authenticity versus the expectation, I was going to work around the subtopic of participation over perfection, finding your voice when you don't fit the mold. And I'm picking this up because I believe that in order to be your authentic self, you have to somehow step in the room and then participate and not really worry about perfection. And so this is where I am coming from. This is the angle that I will be coming from. Now, what the world sees. From the introduction, we all heard a lot of powerful things. Currently, I'm a fellow with the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, part of a team of other brilliant young leaders from all over the world who are changing and creating solutions for their communities. It's an amazing platform. Currently, also the co-founder of Data Bloom Africa. Another very important aspect of what we are doing is to bridge the gap between education and industry, helping and equipping African students for them to be able to connect what they're learning in the classrooms to proper industry applications. Also, recently, I opened up a book club where I'm bringing together like-minded people who want to elevate their reading skills, who would want to do better with their reading and then meet their yearly targets. And sometimes when you look at all of these things, you realize how the world sees you. It's some big guy. And you know, you're in the streets, you hear the gentleman say, "You be big guy, you be big guy." And I sometimes I wonder, it's not what you're seeing. Everything you're seeing may not necessarily be exactly what you think it is. And there's been a lot of battles, there's been a lot of um let me say struggles to get to where I am. And so today I'm just going to shed some light on that journey and I hope it impacts somebody. Um, I don't know if any of us on this call have ever been in a room where we possess a very brilliant idea, but we kept our mouth shut. And it's not because we didn't have the words, but it's because we didn't like how we sounded, or we felt like we didn't sound a particular way. If you're like that, please you can give me a thumbs up. I have been like that for a while. Um, yeah, thank you. And I believe that's something we all face, and that's something we all experience one way or another in our journey in life and in self-actualization. And so I'm very thrilled to hold this conversation or to steer this conversation towards that. Now, before the expectations, I was just a little boy who loved his mother so much and loved spending time with his siblings. And a lot of the time, I always dreamed of becoming a lawyer. For some funny reason, I liked how the profession sounded. And along the line, it changed. I wanted to become a doctor at some point. That also changed. I thought of becoming a pilot. Yeah, that also changed. And after some time, I realized the problem was not what I wanted to be. The problem was the fact that I did not think I was cut out for certain careers because of how I felt about myself and my image as an individual and my self-esteem. And so, how I felt, there was doubt. In our world, I doubted myself so much because growing up, I did not have for lack of a better word, I did not have the very masculine sound or the very masculine voice. I always had the very soft tone. I didn't have a beard. I still don't have a beard. And that had always been a challenge because in every room I walked into, the understanding was every man who is supposed to be in leadership is supposed to possess a certain physique. You have to be tall. You have to sound very deep when you talk. People have to sort of shake a bit, or the ladies have to go, ooh, and all of that. And every time I spoke, it always felt like my voice was always lost the conversations in the room because it wasn't too heavy or it wasn't too deep like the others. And when I stood there, apparently I looked like an emoji. So without a beard, I always had to sort of explain to people my age because they never believed my age when I mentioned my age. And somehow that also contributed to some of the feelings that I had and the fears that I had. Um, I was always afraid to speak because every time I spoke, I was always worried about how I sounded. So even in the university, when I was in class, there were times when the lecturer asked a question and I knew the answer. But because I knew when I spoke in the microphone, everyone would turn and ask, is this a guy or a girl? And you wonder, immediately, my confidence just goes down. And so I always prefer to write exams than actually go to class and have to do a presentation. So for every course that had to grade you presentation inclusive, I always hated those classes because it meant you have to stand in front of the class to probably say a thing or two. And every time I did that, the feedback has always been you have to be more audible, you have to train your voice so that you sound a bit more heavy because guys like to sound heavy. And in male-dominated spaces, we don't talk about it, but it's an unspoken rule to how you look and sound to leadership. And for a while, I felt like I failed. And it transcended so much that my love for details. I'm one of those people that when you send me a document, I always run towards spelling and errors. So I would always go to check your spellings first before I even check what your concept was. Because I believe you can communicate whatever it is you want to communicate. But once your past tenses and your present tenses are not properly aligned, people tend to miss out the message. But even with that, I still felt a bit afraid to even speak up because I'm told no guy go and look for spelling and grammar checks. No guy will go and do a document and be worrying about how uncertainty is spelled. And so somehow I felt every time felt small because I'm told real men don't care about where the comma goes. And I kept shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And I felt like I was not enough. But the problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but they are incomplete. And this is something that one of my favorite speakers, Chimamanda Adichie says. She says the stereotypes, they are just incomplete. And the idea of what a confident man should look or sounded like, I always felt was biased and did not include people like me. Because there were guys out there, even musically, there were guys who were singing, for those who know music a bit, there were guys out there who sang higher or more pitchier than the ladies. And so even sometimes you realize guys like that don't even tend to be bold about that because it's a stereotype that a guy is supposed to sound a certain way. Um, and for after a while, I began to feel like I needed to do better. So I started visiting and watching a lot of videos. I started trying to be like others. So if you're my friend and I am walking with you and I realize people like talking to you, I always wanted to sound like you. And so when I meet my friends who had a lot of bass in their voices, I always sat beside them to always wanted to sound like them because I really disliked how I sounded previously. And it transcended so much into a point where every time I was asked a question, I would carefully stop, clear my throat, and then now ensure that I sounded a certain way before I continued speaking. And that was very difficult to do. But because you wanted to fit in so bad, I had to do it anyways. And there were also times when for a guy will tell you you have to like sports. And so if you like just football, it's not enough. And so around your friends, you always have to pretend like you like basketball, even though you haven't watched basketball before. And it was always so difficult to hang around those people. But then, hey, those were the only friends that you had. And so every time you wanted to make sure that you fit in, and even if that came at the cost of your own self values and self esteem, you were always going to do that. And it made me one of the very confused people. So I always didn't know what I wanted to do after school because I realized anything I wanted to do might require me speaking. And me speaking just meant that I will sound a certain way. And there will be someone out there who tell me my voice is not as deep as a male's voice is supposed to sound like. And for a while, I started listening to some of my favorite or people that have become one of my favorite go-to listeners and podcasts. I always listened to Chimamanda Adichie, and one thing I loved about her was how she told her stories and ensured that it reflected her personal views on certain subjects. And every time she always ensured that she carried her culture with it. And she didn't have to be too loud, but whenever she delivers a speech, her words always resounded in the room. And I always wondered how she was able to do that. So I started watching her videos, watching her speeches of graduation speeches when she was always doing her book launches. I was always watching those YouTube videos to see how maybe perhaps I could pick a thing or two and then maybe sound better. I started watching Bernard Avle for my Ghanaians. You know Bernard Avle of CCTV. I used to really listen to him a lot because I always wanted myself to sound very intelligent. I mean, if my voice is not great, I have to sound intelligent anyways. And every time I tune into the radio, he's always one of the first people I would listen to because I really wanted to really sound like what the community and the society wanted me to sound like. Then I came to Trevor Noah. I've always very keen and very interested and intrigued in how he was able to tell the jokes, but they always came from a place of knowledge. They were not very basic jokes. He always told the jokes because he had information, and the jokes were always. I think sometimes I always felt like it takes sort of an intellectual person to sometimes understand some of the jokes. If you're not following politics, if you're not following a lot of these things, you may not understand the joke. Then the last one on this was Simon Sinek. I still listen to him. I've always wondered how he was always being very bold, but again, he's a public speaker, so but he was always very bold and expressive about his thoughts. And with all of that, I always wanted to sound like these people, but there was a problem: the danger of mimicry. When you start imitating other people, it comes at the cost of your self-identity. Because the moment you want to sound a certain way, you realize after a while you can't even identify your own voice. And I don't know about other people, but every time I send a voice note to people, I always don't want to hear myself, even on a recording, because I think I sound terrible, or how I think I sound is not how, let me say, WhatsApp will play back to me. I want to blame WhatsApp. But every time I do something like that, I never listen to my voice notes. I never replay them. I think even to date, I don't replay my voice notes because I think what you ordered and what you got is what is going to happen. It will not be the same. And so I started listening to all these people, and I realized how much I began to sound very different. And so when I enter a room, someone's like, "Are you sure you're okay? Because you sound like you don't sound like yourself." And I keep asking, so if I don't sound like myself, what do you want to sound like? Because when I am myself, there seems to be a problem. And so then what do you guys want me to sound like? Because when I'm talking, he said, you tell me something else. And now I'm trying to do what I think and I believe you think will work. But somehow that's also a problem. You don't appreciate it. Then I realized the problem really wasn't me. And what even broke me was in my final year thesis presentation. For most of us who are in the university, so those who have completed, for some of the courses or programs that you study in school, you have to do a final year thesis presentation on what you do in your final year. So for me, in the chemistry department, I had to go and present my topic, the project I had worked on for final year. And in the room, I entered the room and there were about 5 lecturers. There were 3 ladies and I think 2 gentlemen. No, there were 3 gentlemen and 2 ladies, sorry. And along the presentation, I knew for a fact, after I had probably moved across 3 slides, I knew I was done for because I was nervous. I was mincing my words. I couldn't even let out some of the chemistry terms that were required for my presentation. And in that heat of the moment, I felt more pressure because these 5 people are the people that are going to give me an A. They're going to determine whether or not my project is fit to be passed or to help me graduate. And I sat in the room and I stood in front of them and I made a mess. I embarrassed myself. And what even made it worse was when one of the professors asked me a very simple question: what were heavy metals? And I could not bring myself to answer that question. And his statement was, for 4 years in the school, have you really learned anything? And I felt so discouraged. I remember leaving the room and I told myself I was never going to do a presentation anywhere. I was even, if you ever ask me what program I studied, I'll tell you I would never mention chemistry because I was very shy. I was very embarrassed. I felt like, I think that day I actually was hoping that the floor was going to open and I would enter because this was one of the lecturers that had the power to tell everybody else that, oh, nah, this guy is not fit. We can't give him an A. But somehow I graduated with an A because my supervisor told me after the presentation that, oh, she loved my write-up, but she's praying and hoping that I would overcome my fear of people when it comes to presentations because she did not understand why a very simple question like what are heavy metals? She could really answer it. Final year. And I realized at that moment, it was not because I didn't have the information. It was because I wasn't confident in and I didn't believe what I was even presenting. So I went there all in my white shirt, black trousers, I think was it a black tie or blue tie? And I went in there with my glasses on, feeling all good. And I get there and I see the people, and then somehow all of that energy just disappears. And I don't know about a lot of us on this call, but that has been one of my most embarrassing moments. I don't think I will be ever forget it because every time it rings and hammers in my head that really the people in the room are not necessarily strangers or they are not vampires. They are just people, and you can always just do the presentation or just identify that one person in there and just talk to them. And I wish I had known this earlier. I'm very sure my projects would have probably been published if I was able to present it and defended it well. But yeah. And one day, I'm tired. I was tired of, I don't want to call it bullied, but people think small companies so seriously. And for country, I'll explain. So it means you just like speaking a lot of grammar, but really we're not going to take what you're saying seriously, because when the day comes for the presentation, we're looking for somebody who appears tall and built and looks a certain way, because you look like you can't handle a room. And all of that because my voice sounded very soft and it wasn't heavy. And with that, I found a community of people. These are people that I think were always telling me the truth, that my voice was not a problem. But every time, it's like when your friends tell you the truth, you think maybe they are just trying to be nice to you. So you go out and somebody tells you something else. And even though the people may be lying, you don't trust what your friends are telling because you think maybe they are sugarcoating it because they love you too much. And with time, I started believing it because um, these were people that understood me and sort of knew what I wanted to do and what I'd always wanted to be like. And so they would always say, Charlie, this is your voice. You have to do something about it. You have to basically use it for something. You can't have this nice voice and just be sitting there and you're not doing anything with it. And I always felt, Charlie, what will they talk? Because I don't believe it. Because I'm very sure if I'm to play my audio for somebody, the person will close their ears. But these were people that were always ready to open doors, and where there were opportunities for presentations, they will always say, let's Raymond talk. Amongst all of us, Raymond is very vocal. And I'm like, how do you say something like that? Because the moment I start talking, I'll fumble. But with such a community, more opportunities were given, and that gift was harnessed and was honed to become what it is today, I believe. Um, and one thing about an impactful community is it has to be very intentional. If you don't have people who are very intentional about you and even about themselves, you can't learn from each other. It's the thing about community is it's supposed to be uplifting. So if you feel like you're in a community where it's always one-sided, you either have to do all the giving and you don't get anything from them, or you are always the one who's to take. You're the only one in the friendship group who is always depressed, always sad about something, and you can't be there for the other people. It just shows, sometimes I believe it just shows your lack of intentionality about the kind of community you have. And I also believe an impactful or a very good friendship circle should be safe. Your friendship circles have to be safe, or wherever that you believe you are getting mentorship from, it has to be very safe. If at any point in time you feel like these people are not taking you very seriously and your opinions and your views don't matter, I believe you need to get out of that space. Because truth is, if your tribe would determine the kind of value you are producing. And so an example would be that if you want to become a doctor, I don't think it would be prudent to surround yourself with people who are probably in music. Yes, it will give you a different perspective, but the doctors are the ones that will be discussing the things that pertain to your career. And so if for some reason you are not very intentional and you don't also make that friendship circle safe, I don't think you will ever grow. I don't think you will ever be confident in what you're doing. I also believe that impactful communities have to elevate. For one thing, I believe strongly is if I'm around my friends, I don't think I've ever gone more than a few days and we've not had a conversation or a new conversation every time. Every time we meet up, there's always something new to discuss. And it's not because we are the most intelligent or we are the most, let me say, for lack of a better, most productive people in the world. No, but it's just because everybody's making the effort to want to improve on themselves one way or another. Somebody's learning how to code better. Somebody's learning how to probably write speeches better. Somebody's probably learning how to do certain things better than they did previously. And that is a group that I believe everybody should be part of. If you don't have something like that, you should really look into getting to one. And lastly, I believe every group or every community you join should be able to flourish. Um, Sometimes we tend to get very, very comfortable with our friends, and that's one of the challenges, familiarity. And so we don't tend to see um, the value that the other person is bringing onto the friendship. And I'm hoping after this call, you probably sit down and reevaluate your friendship circle and look at everybody's strength, and you realize you're actually picking up on everybody's strengths and weaknesses, but you just haven't paid attention to it. There's always that one friend who is doing something, and after a while, by association, you realize you've also picked up that particular trait. And that only works when you are very intentional, and you are also very willing to learn. There are no, I believe, if it's a friendship or it's a community where there are a lot of egos, there's no growth, and that friendship becomes a place for a lot of jealousy and envy. But I mean, a community that is founded in love, um you would always find people there, because once they want to invest into the relationship, they will always put in the work. And with that, I transformed. That's extreme, but yes, I think I like this one. But I transformed and I grew. After building that community, I started small. And sometimes that's the thing. They tell you think big, but sometimes I think big, but execute small. Because sometimes the idea is big, but what we don't sometimes realize is executing it in bits is what will take us to where we want to get to. If I want to buy a car currently, and maybe perhaps my salary is maybe 5,000 Ghana cedis, and the car is maybe 200,000, I should not really jump to go and be very eager to, okay, no, I need 200,000. No. But what if I give myself a very good plan and execute it? And maybe I tell myself in 2 years, I want to get that car. And if every month I'm going to put a certain amount of money down and be very intentional about it, I believe by the time I reach there, I may have even exceeded the amount, because I am putting intentional efforts to ensure that that plan that I have is a big idea, but I'm not putting a lot of pressure on myself to want to execute that very big idea. But when you break it down into smaller plans and smaller ideas, you realize by the time you give yourself a time frame in 1 year, maybe perhaps you want to start that podcast you have been really wanting to start. You want to write that book. You don't necessarily have to write all the book in one night. You just have to start small. Maybe one chapter a week. You start like that. And by the time you realize in 52 weeks, you have probably written a book. And it didn't take your mental health away. It didn't take anything away from you. It didn't affect your relationships. It didn't even affect a lot of things. But that's the thing. When we think big, sometimes we forget to plan and include all the other aspects of our lives. And so you can think of a plan, and before you realize, you want balance, but because of the kind of thing that you want to do, you're losing balance, or you're losing focus on one side of your life. And I believe that's very dangerous, because the moment you achieve what you want to achieve, now the other parts of your life begin to lag, and that's not very great. For me, what I started doing was I started reading announcements in church. And so every time an opportunity came to read announcements, I said, well, that's it. I will start reading announcements. So every time the opportunity came, I took up the microphone, read the announcement. There were days where I'll make a mistake, but I kept telling myself, we rise, we go again. And after a while, I was always the go-to guy to read announcements. It wasn't difficult. It's just because everybody saw the consistency and the growth. I started taking on from there. I started taking on moderator roles. I remember my very first moderation was for an art exhibition by a solo art exhibition by an international artist, Fazia. And I remember when the opportunity came, I was so tense because I wasn't very familiar with the art space. And yes, I loved looking at paintings at some point. I loved music, which is also a form of art. But to sit there with an artist to ask them questions about how they arrived at where they were, that felt like a new territory to me. But again, I took on the challenge. and I did my homework. And after that moderation, it opened more doors. And I realized I almost gave up on that opportunity like 3 times. The first time I was told, I said, hey, no, I can't do it because you'll be in the room with other art enthusiasts, and these are people that know what they're about. You can't just go and sit there and think that you can maybe just run your way through like every other thing. And I kept turning it down, kept turning it down. And then the third time I was like, nah. I mean, after all, what happens? The microphone goes off or I collapse there. I mean, what's the worst that could go wrong? At the end of the day, I still showed up. And that was more important for me, the showing up aspect. And with that, I went into voiceovers. And even that was a very funny thing because I was sitting in my office one day and I get a call that I need you to read this for me. I'm doing a video for my company. I need you to read this for me. And I'm like, why are you bringing it to me? It's like, oh, you speak very good English. So maybe if you read it, will work. And I did that reading, I sent it. And again, my insecurity sets in. I deleted the video. I actually did about 10 audios and I deleted each of them because every time I played it back, I was like, nah, this doesn't sound good. And if it's going out there, people are going to be asking, who is this? So I kept deleting the videos, deleting the audios, and she kept texting, "Well, how far?" And I'm like, Charlie, pressure. But then again, I couldn't send that one audio because I was afraid that I wasn't good enough. And maybe she should just go and look for somebody else to just do this audio for her. Because I mean, there are other professionals out there. Why are you coming to me, an amateur? And when I sent her the audio, I didn't hear back from her for like 24 hours. I said, oh well, at least we gave it a try. And I mean, so I was very sad about it. I was like, well, you see, this is what happens when you try to cut your coat over your size. And I realized the next morning she sends a message and she says, are you a serious boy at all? Why are you not doing voiceovers? And I'm like, For what exactly? What do you mean? And she's like, the audio was good. I sent to the team and they love the audio. So why are you sitting on your voice? And then it hit me again. The voice is not the problem. It's me listening to what everybody else has been saying. And maybe too, they're also speaking from their own insecurities. Maybe they want to do what I am doing. Maybe perhaps they want the confidence to be able to just say, I'm going to try anyways. And so they are just going to demean and derail your efforts. But with that, I ended up doing more videos for her. And I think currently I can call myself a voiceover maestro, but that's a stretch. But yeah. And it made me appreciate how much every every person around you sees what you're doing. Once you're putting in the work, everybody's seeing it. And so when an opportunity comes, I don't think anybody will pass up an opportunity because they know how much you've shown some certain seriousness to what you're doing and certain consistency and intentionality. And then I ventured into speech writing. I began writing certain speeches so I'll be in the office and my boss comes and it's like, I have a speech here. I need to write it. I'm like, there's ChatGPT. Why it comes in? No, 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 no. ChatGPT will write it, but I need you to add your understanding and how you see the world. And that was the first time he had ever said something. He said, you think differently. You don't think like a scientist. You don't think just like a scientist. You add, because of the kind of world you find yourself in, you have allowed it to sort of um, describe or sort of build the kind of identity that you have. So when you write certain things, people can really appreciate where you're coming from. And they can really see that it's not just science that you know, but you also know other things. I was like, okay, sure, why not? And I wrote the thing for him, and he's like, Charlie, this one, you have to go into it. So I realized everything I have mentioned all came about because people looked at me and said, these are avenues for you. And we don't get why you are sitting just trying to just tell yourself you're a scientist. You are more than that. And to explore those options. What's the worst that could happen? You failed, or maybe perhaps you don't get more opportunities after the one you do. Well, at least you've done it anyways. And with that, I started getting more deals. And in recent times, I sat in a room and a question was asked. And for once, I raised my hand, not because I sort of knew all the answers, but because I told myself I wanted to participate in what they were talking about. And so when I raised my hand, it it made a lot of sense at that moment that we're really doing this and we're really going all in. And I stopped being hesitant. I stopped being quiet. I stopped being doubtful. And it took me a long time to get there. And I'm hoping that with all the things that we are doing and with all the people I have around me, I'm hoping that I can be of help to somebody for them not to take that long a time to get to that point. Because trust me, by the time you realize you've lost a lot of opportunities that you really wished you had. And all it lacked at that time was just confidence. All it lacked at that time was just some grit and some passion. And with that, I started doing the voiceovers. And then I started making some income from there. And I realized you can make money off a lot of things. You are just not the one who is not, and you're the one who's just not putting in a lot of the work and a lot of, or you're not seen as an avenue to make some cash. And I think it's something that we as people who do sometimes a 9 to 5, we tend to get very boxed in because we feel like the 9 to 5 is all we know and there's no more time. But I think sometimes even the fact that you dress well, it's a niche you can get into. If you're one of the people that in your space, your friends are always telling you that every time they want a fashion advice, they are coming to you. I think you're a fashion stylist and you should just look sharp about it. Just venture into it because there's no time. There is no time. And for me, what I believe the confidence framework should look like is first, you have to act. When you think of the idea, when you think of the speech, you should not sit on it. In the moment you are in class, a question is asked, you think of the answer. Don't hesitate. Because the truth is, there are always two people and there are two voices always fighting each other. There's the one that tells you this answer you're about to give is wrong. Or are you sure about it? And then every time it will lie to you to go and confirm on Google search. So every time a question is asked in class, you catch a lot of people always confirming with that ChatGPT or Google search. It's not because you don't know the answer. It's because that tiny voice is telling you, confirm the answer. Sometimes it's good, but then I believe it's it's one of the insecurities that I believe we all have to overlook. The worst that could happen is you are told, oh, it's not correct. But at the end of the day, you have spoken. And I've had friends in class who were always identified by lecturers because they are always very quick to speak in class. Not because they knew, but because they wanted to be seen. And opportunities came, and those were people that they were always called because the lecturers knew that for these people, they are very eager to learn. They are very eager to take on opportunities. And sometimes I feel like with our society, we are very, and I think sometimes it's also the socialization we get when we are growing up. It's don't do too much, or maybe you are doing too much. And so sometimes the tendency to want to act quickly, we tend to slouch in our chairs and we tend to overthink a lot. So someone says, before an African man would get into business, he would ask about 100 people, send about 100 proposals, and still the proposal sits on his table. But when you go and ask a white man comes in, he has already spotted where he's going to make his money from. He has already drawn the plan and he moves because he understands the market may change. But sometimes with the African man, we will sit on the idea and every time, and we are also very quick to sell ideas, not plans. We are all the executions. We are always very quick. Oh, I thought of this idea. And then the question then comes, okay, so what happened to the idea? They are like, oh yeah, I'm still working on it. And sometimes it's a lie because you know the reason why you haven't executed that idea is because you don't trust yourself. And I think sometimes you don't need to be perfect. You don't need to be perfect at all. A lot of the things that we do, they say you learn on the job. You can only correct mistakes when you actually launch the product. And so if you want to they're bringing out mobile phones. I don't think that iPhone sits there and they tell themselves, oh, we are bringing a perfect product. No, then we wouldn't be having some of the issues and complaints they get. But the moment the product is launched, it's after that, when people are using it, then now we get to see the feedback. And I believe the first step is for you to act. And then comes reframe. So in the process of acting, you get feedback, then you start reorganizing what you're doing. So you start reorganizing your identity. You start reorganizing what you really believe in. So in the beginning, maybe perhaps iPhone started with one camera, and after a while, it digressed. Because after a while, they started through the execution, they realized, okay, people want more. What can we do? And so you start reframing. Then comes the other thing. To be confident, you need a community. I can't emphasize this enough because I wouldn't even be here on this call if not for the same community I found myself in. And it's very important because it's in those communities that they recommend. We always say that in Africa, getting a job is not based on your CV or your credentials. It's actually who you know. And that is based on community. If you're not stepping out to network, if you're not stepping out of your comfort zone to meet more people, I think you are just going to box yourself and you keep doing that for a very long time. And that will not do you any good. And another thing is contributions. Sometimes I think we get very defensive when people give us critique, people critique our work. And it's not because we don't welcome the critique, it's because we feel like they are attacking our personality. And I believe criticisms are not an attack on your personality. If if you're wearing a shirt and I'm critiquing the shirt, it's the shirt I critique. It's not you, the person. But then sometimes we find ourselves in places where we feel like maybe perhaps people are attacking our personality. And so we get very defensive when someone tells you, oh, maybe perhaps you should do this way. And a typical human being mentality, we tell ourselves, are you trying to say I'm not smart? Or are you trying to tell me that you know better than me? And when the moment the ego sets in, we begin to see the other person as a competitor or as a competition. So even no matter the good advice the person gives, we don't want it because we feel like you're trying to compete with me. I want you to reflect while I move on. There are certain things that are holding us back as individuals. There are things you want to do. There are things that you want to say, but they're holding you back. And another thing I believe confidence is rooted in is truth. If you can't be honest about what you believe in and about your values, you can't be confident because confident people believe in themselves. And you can only believe in yourself if you know yourself, if you know the truth, and you are able to share that truth without fidgeting, without compromising. And you have to do respectfully. Unfortunately, sometimes people can get very bold in their truth and they start getting very disrespectful to other people's beliefs. But I think while you're accommodating other people's beliefs, you have to stand for what you believe in. Your confidence will only come from there. It will only be rooted in that truth that I know myself. These are the things that um, don't sit well with me. These are things that I can't accommodate. That way, you make it easy for people to be around you and people can sort of contribute and pour into you because they know and they understand what your strengths and your weaknesses are. But if you keep letting everything in and allowing just anything in, you realize you'll be living a lie. And so when the music is over, you now go back and sit in your room and you're sad because truth is you didn't want to dance to that music, but somehow you allowed them to play that music for you and you danced anyways. Um, Again, I'd say participation is important because recently I found myself again in a room with so the government of Ghana, the Ministry of Communications was putting together an AI policy document, and my startup, along with my co-founders, we got the opportunity to be in the room with some of the lecturers and professors and some of the people from the ministries, and they had laid down a roadmap to how they wanted to execute the plan. And I saw something in there that caught my attention. And I thought, well, I had a few comments. And immediately I thought of the comments. The typical me, I'll first write it down so that I can articulate better. So I wrote all my points down. But then something happened. I stopped. I stopped writing and I sat in the chair. I didn't want to speak because somehow that voice kept telling me again, this is a very big space. Everybody will be waiting to listen to what you're about to say. Your voice, can you hear all the men in the room? They sound very different. They sound very, very, very different. Can you hear how everybody sounds? They don't sound like you. So I came back and I sat there the whole time. And it took me, and this is somebody that I thought had made progress. It took me 30 minutes to raise my hand. After all the microphone had gone round the room, it took me about 30 minutes to raise my hand up and say what I wanted to say. And to my surprise, again, everything I said was noted. The moderator said, noted, this is a very good plan. And I realized I could have saved a lot of time if I had just acted immediately. But then again, I allowed that voice in my mind that kept telling me that, no, in the room, you are young. These are older people. And older people, it will come off like you are either you think you know too much or you come tell them what to do. And again, look at you, there's no beard. Who is going to take you seriously? But I realized that in certain spaces, really, a lot of the time, appearance is not really what people look at. It's how you say the kind of things you want to say and how respectful you are about how you're saying it. And so sometimes we enter rooms and we always feel like you are either overdressed or underdressed. Truth is, nobody's really looking there. No one is actually looking at you. Everybody is there for a particular purpose. And in that meeting, everybody was just there to make their voice heard. Nobody really cared how they sounded. Nobody really cared how they looked. Yes, it was a formal setting. Everybody wanted to look a certain way. But truth was, they really didn't care how they sounded or how they looked. It was in there, and there was a national interest that was at heart, and everyone wanted to ensure that their voice and their institutions contributed. And so I realized if I hadn't spoken after 30 minutes and the meeting had ended, it means that my company would have lost big time, because that was a contribution that opened a door for us in that room. And I realized that was going to cost me. And I want to say it is important to view that opportunity as a moment to represent your brand in its most authentic form. So you don't need to overthink it. Sometimes even we have that imposter syndrome where we are around, for lack of a better expression, white people, or let me say people from abroad. I just go back into town people. When you are sitting with them, we are always very quick to want to alter our accents because we feel like that will fit in. I get it that sometimes because we feel like they will understand if we use that kind of accent, but sometimes I feel like that's not the truth. We just want to fit in so bad, we forget how to be our authentic self. Because if they are being authentic, why can't you also be authentic? Why can't they also accept the way you are sounding? Why can't they also try to also understand that the cultures are different? It's a culture clash. I don't have to demean or undermine my culture because I want to make you feel at home. No, we both have to compromise. And I feel like sometimes that's one of the things we do as Africans. We tend to compromise a lot on our values, on our culture, even from where we're coming from. Sometimes because we want to fit in so bad, we always want to tone down on ourselves, on our authentic selves. So you're going for a meeting and probably they say, rep your country. And you realize a lot of Africans want to wear suits. And I'm like, come on, guys. The thing specifically said rep your culture. So if it's Agbada, you want to go in your Agbada. And let them be able to, now the onus lies on them to want to say, I want to understand this. And a lot of the time, when you go to meetings and you wear some of these things, they are always intrigued because they want to know the stories behind what you're wearing. But because of how we've been conditioned to think that we are inadequate or we are not enough. So when we enter those rooms, we are always very quick to want to tone down on ourselves, tone down on where we are coming from. And these things, we may not see them now, but what we are doing is that we keep passing on, for lack of a better word again, we keep passing on trauma that we experienced onto the next generation, and it's not going to change. If we want to change the narrative, if we want to change how the generations coming up see themselves, it has to also start from how we see ourselves. And so if we are doing that, we have to start by being authentic. We can't be in the room and we are always very quick to want to just show our teeth, just smile to everything, even when it sounds disrespectful. It sends a certain, it feels like a sign of low self-esteem because you are listening to somebody being very demeaning to you, but somehow you're telling yourself, oh, just forget about it. And what happens is they've said to you, again, an opportunity has been presented. You have to, the moment you debunk that, you're not only stopping it being transcendent to other people, but you're also educating whoever that person is to also understand that, yeah, there are certain extremes that you don't do. There's certain things that you're allowed to say, but you don't say them. There's a way to go about saying them. And that's one of the things that I believe that once we are building our confidence, we should not just build them for our workplaces. We should also build them in places where when we step outside work, it should always be 24/7. Every time someone meets you, they should be able to say that Raymond is this. Raymond does not like it when you tell him he's short. He doesn't like it when you tell him maybe his hairline is crooked. But then you're being respectful about some of those things because I will not say that to you. And so when that respect is being accorded to you, you should be able to demand same. And I think sometimes we are very afraid to demand it because we feel like when we are demanding it, you might be coming off as you are being too much. Um, can you hear me now? Is it better? Wonderful. Thank you. So what have I been saying the last few minutes? Um, in order to be successful, there's no right time. It's now. It's now or never. Put it at the back of your mind that whatever it is you're going to do, you're doing it today, you're doing it now. You're not waiting for another um um you're not waiting for another opportunity. I'll give you an example. When we're starting our startup, Data Bloom Africa, we spent a week in launching that project because when we thought of the idea, we spent a whole night drafting documents, putting everything together. We told ourselves it's now or never. And it's been one of the most inspiring journeys because we've seen how much we've grown in the last almost a year now. And it's amazing because when we started, we did not see the company getting to where it is now. We always thought of it like it's just one project. And when we are done with that project, well, we'll see. But along the line, we were consistent. And with that consistency came learning new things. And then we realized, okay, no, there's more to this than we have seen. If we had sat there and again, we had the proposals and we're telling ourselves, okay, we want to send it to this person to review it, we want to send it to this person to, you realize by the time we were going to be done, we would have probably launched that thing in like never because we'll be telling ourselves we need to make it perfect, we need to make it perfect. But the truth is, no product was launched perfect, like I mentioned. And you have to act before you feel confident. Truth is, confidence only comes, I believe, when it comes in line of the action. So if you want to be able to say what is on your mind freely, um, yeah, okay, sure. We need to make sure that whatever it is that we are saying, we have, you say it, and then that confidence builds up. Because truth is, in the heat of the moment, that's when you know how to navigate certain things. And always look at impact over expectations. One thing for me is when these days, anytime I open my mouth, what I'm always hoping for is at least let somebody pick a sentence that resonates with them. But the moment that resonates with them, we are good to go. And also remember, your difference is your advantage. Um, you think you dress too different, trust me, it's your advantage. If you feel like perhaps you don't sound a certain way, maybe your English is not so polished, I'm telling you, that is your advantage. That is your advantage. People will listen to you because it's not what they are always used to. They will be intrigued. And with that intrigue, you can continue to build from there. Finally, I just want to say that your voice doesn't need permission. It just needs expression. It just needs a speaker to just sound the alarms. It just needs a speaker. It just needs an expression. And so for anybody on this call who feels as though whenever you want to do something, you feel like you're small, you feel like you're not good enough, I'm here to tell you that truth is all the resources you need, you have them. The only thing that you haven't done yet is to act on it. And so if for some reason you think you have that voice and you probably want to drop an album very soon, I'm telling you, just look at it, start now. The only way you know if the voice is good enough is when somebody gives you feedback, and that feedback can only come when you execute the thing. Thank you so much for your time.
Wow, 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 wow. Thank you so much, Raymond. You've, in fact, I'm very, very sure that this relates to so many people. I, for one, it relates so much with me. Like, it was like you're speaking to me, you're preaching to me, you know. Thank you so much for this wonderful session. Thank you. And I'm sure we all have very, very a lot of key takeaways from this session. You need that confidence. You need to overcome the self-doubt. Know your tribe. You need to act, reframe, community, and contribute, because those are the things that would actually assist you, and not only in your personal life. This also will reflect in your professional life. So, we have so many times that we are in meetings and you have the idea, they're talking and all of that, and you just keep quiet until someone speaks up, and then you be like, oh, and I actually wanted to say this. This is what I had in mind. So I'm sure it happens to most of us. And that's where you have the issue of visibility and all of that. So those that speak up, those that raise their hand are the ones that are being noticed. And most of the time, like you said, it's not all the time that they have answers to these questions or something. They just want to contribute, they want to be seen, they want to be heard. And that's what actually happens. So we have some questions. In fact, the chat room is buzzing with a lot of applause and emojis. Thank you. So we have a question. How does one navigate insecurities affecting their confidence, especially when they do not get support from their community?
Thank you for the question. I think my very first thing would be, my first answer would be, I think you have to admit the insecurity. The problem sometimes can be that we tend to generalize a lot of the things, a lot of our experiences. Um, I'll give an example. If you're doing a presentation, you have to be able to identify if your problem is speech, or your problem is you are very forgetful, or your problem is maybe perhaps you're not very good with PowerPoints. And so when you look at all those three, those are imperfections that sometimes can become insecurities. And so the first step is to identify them. Now, secondly, truth is sometimes community, you don't necessarily have to wait for it. Sometimes it can be an online community of people who are doing some of the things that you are doing, and maybe perhaps you're doing it better. I'm always reminded of this thing that there's nothing new under the sun. And so if for some reason you are feeling very insecure about your voice, you just have to look at somebody who is doing something voice related and look at how maybe perhaps the only difference is perhaps you just need to maybe change your pitch a bit. Maybe you sound too high or you sound too low. You just have to change it. The problem is not perhaps the dexterity of your voice or how maybe the texture. It's just the execution. So sometimes you have the idea, but then communicating it is also the other factor. So sometimes if even speakers, when they are speaking, sometimes you realize in their speeches, sometimes they get very quiet. They say something and you realize it's like they're waiting for a certain applause. Like they will say like mic drop. Those are part of it, and there are techniques to it. And so then once you identify that insecurity, you have to understand that there are people out there who probably have similar insecurities, who have similar things. Look at watch their stories and look at how they navigated that. Then with that, another thing I believe so strongly is sometimes you don't even need the physical presence. We sometimes undermine or underplay the value of online friendships. There are places like LinkedIn where people are doing some of these very amazing things. You can just, amongst your network, you can always find somebody that can probably steer you towards a certain direction. And I think that will be it. So it always has to be is identifying it. And then once you identify it, just start. working on it, work on some of those insecurities. Because truth is, sometimes those insecurities actually can become the powerful tool that you need to move forward. And so you have to work on it. And sometimes the community may not be very supportive, but truth is, now when you are working on it, that community sometimes, when they start seeing what the work you've done on yourself, they want to come around because now they've seen the perfect product in their minds. And so just find that niche for yourself. Find people outside your community. Find people that are already doing it online, and then maybe follow their streets. The moment you follow, you see the ones that are not working for you, and you can just maybe remove some and add some, like as you move along. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. The next question is, did you have to battle imposter syndrome at any point?
Yes, a lot, a lot. Like I mentioned, we have a certain understanding of what masculinity looks like, and so for a while, I think I always didn't feel very masculine. So it's like I enter a room and I think even when I was a kid, a lot of the time when the boys used to play football, when the guys used to play football in the area and they see me coming, they intentionally kick the ball for it to land beneath my feet with the hope that I'll kick the ball. And they know that I can't kick the ball. And so every time, the moment I can't kick the ball, they start laughing. So I started avoiding any playground that had or any football fields every time my mom used to send me when I was a kid. So I would always, even if it would take me an extra 10 minutes to get to where I want to get to, I would always avoid it because I didn't feel like I was like them. And so every time I used to meet up with them, it always felt that way till my teacher in school said something to me that he said, you read better than most of the boys in the classroom. And so I think that should be your advantage. And a lot of the time, I was mostly first in class. So it was one of the things that he said. It reminded me of the fact that I don't necessarily have to be a footballer to make all the money in the world. I can actually do something else and be better. And I realized, and he looked at me and said, he doesn't play football, but do I think he looks a certain way? He said, and I said, no. He said, yes. So then that's how it is. The moment you allow people to feed on some of those insecurities, you realize that they they enjoy it too much, one, and two, it gives them certain power because they know for a fact that you are better than them in certain ways. And the only way they can win over you is by keep hammering on some of these things that you have. So for me, those imposter syndromes were there. I The only way I battled them was through those words. I kept reminding myself that no matter what you do, I'm smarter than you. When they put the exam papers before me, I will pass. I will beat you. And so I don't necessarily need to probably come and play sports with you to make myself feel good. I liked where I was. And yeah, did it take me a long time to get there? Very long. But I'm there now. And I don't think right now anybody can tell me anything and I'll feel a certain way anymore. So yeah.
Thank you for that. Okay, so the next question, I think I'm going to just merge it. One is, how do you navigate all those insecurities affecting your confidence? I think you spoke about that earlier. And then we have, how did you navigate from the ideal image trap to accepting yourself the way you are?
Um First, I think I accepted that some of the things I am good at, again, nobody else is good at. And so truth is sometimes the challenge is we tend to lean more to our weaknesses. But I realized I just had to lean more to my strengths. So I was very good with speech writing. Okay, well then that's it. I don't necessarily have to be the Simon Sinek of my generation. I can be the Raymond. The difference will be that perhaps I'm a better writer. And so I just need to work on that. The problem with ideal images, sometimes I feel like it's flawed because it's based on somebody's experience of how it's the same way people say men are scum. It's because of an experience they've had with men. And so they think, okay, every man that comes their way is a scum. But ideally, it's just your experience. And so sometimes these days, what I try to do, what I've gotten now is if you tell me something or if I hear a concept, one thing I try to do is find out where the concept comes from and try to research who that person is because truth is people tend to say things based on their experiences, and it has nothing to do with you. It's just that they have been socialized to think a certain way. And so again, society has always known that men are supposed to look a certain way. And so then who brought that up? It's because that person had never experienced men with high-pitched voices. So now I've met older men who speak, you see them tall, and when they speak, you realize nah, they have very soft voices. It's now we are breaking away from that norm. And so again, I look at where my strengths are. And then when I look at a concept or somebody comes to tell me something that they think is ideal and everybody's supposed to follow, I always research and go back to find out what their experiences are. Because that is where I believe that's where all ideologies the society has now are coming from. It's based on somebody's experiences. So I hope I've answered the question.
Yes, you have. Okay, so we have my difference is my advantage. Okay, it's just a comment. So long as I'm making impact, keep working to improve. One day I'll be at the level of my expectation. That's the participants' takeaway today. Thank you, Zambrang, for that.
Mark, thank you.
Yes. All right. So thank you so much, Raymond. In fact, this has been a very authentic presentation, and thank you for sharing your experience with us. So at least it brings it really close to home for most of us. And to our audience, thank you once again for joining us, and I believe it was really worth your time. If you missed any part of this session or you would love to watch it again, please visit our YouTube channel for the recording at the_value loop. You can also follow us on our WhatsApp and LinkedIn pages, the Value Loop Hub. So we'll be seeing you next time when we come with another inspiring and informative session. Till then, please do enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Valerie. Thank you.
Thank you.